Hi there, Year 12, it's Miss Chalkley. Today we're going to be having a look at how migration policies have changed. So far you've had a look at different elements of migration and the factors that influence migration. And today we're going to look at, well, how is migration then controlled through government policies? A relevant topic for a number of different reasons. Firstly, Brexit and how that's influencing government policy, but also, if you keep your eye on the news and look at America, how coronavirus is perhaps influencing migration policy. As you can see here, we're in part 2 of the spec. We're actually quite near the end of part 2A. So this is your last lesson on theory. I'll go through key content on each slide, and then I'll refer to the part of the worksheet that you need to fill out. So you can either do this on the worksheet itself, or you can make appropriate notes in your exercise books. Now, to start us off then, there are 3 different types of migration policy. Here I'm going to be talking about open door policies, quotas and skills tests. So an open door policy is a policy that allows anyone to come and live in a country. The country will often run campaigns abroad, usually targeting specific groups, to try and encourage people to go and live in that country. For example, there is an open door policy for migration between EU countries. The second type of migration policy is quotas. This restricts the number of people allowed into a country per year. The country may decide on different things to restrict. For example, the total number of people allowed, or the total number of people from a particular area, or a particular type of person. And finally, and the one we're going to look at most today, is a skills test type migration policy. For this, migrations pass a skills test, ensures that all migrants that come into a country are skilled and qualified. It often involves a points-based system where you have to have skills in certain areas to get enough points to qualify to being admitted. So on the worksheet there is this table. Okay, what you need to do is use the information I've just given you to complete it. So what are the 3 types? You need to listen to what I've said, and then you need to use that information to think about, well, what might be the positives and the negatives of those types of migration policy. So first we're going to look at some different types of immigration policies. So people moving into a country and how governments might try to control who comes into their country. So we're going to look at 4 different types of immigration policy. We've got Australia, Canada, the UK, and then the European Union. The first thing you need to do is, once you've listened to the different types of migration policy, well, which one are they? Are they an open door, a quota, or a skills test? And then you need the key features. You need specific facts, specific information that you can include in an exam answer. Start with Australia. Australian working visas are the most commonly granted to highly skilled workers. Candidates are assessed against a points-based system, with points allocated for certain standards of education. These visas are often sponsored by individual states, which recruit workers according to specific needs. Visas might also be granted to applicants sponsored by an Australian business. So they take into account things like age, your ability to speak different languages, your experience in the job, and your education. Now at the end of this, I have put the website that you can go and have a go and see, with your future career aspiration, could you get into Australia? So I did it with my job, and you can see that I would have earned 85 points, meaning that I have met the criteria, and if I wanted to, I could go and work and live in Australia. Okay. The second policy we're going to look at is the Canadian policy. It's a very successful immigration policy based at filling a skills gap. Okay, it's very well supported by the Canadian population. 82% of people support immigration. The policy is aimed at the country's long-term requirements for engineers, IT specialists and healthcare workers. So you can see it's reasonably similar to the Australian example, where they're looking for specific jobs that need to be filled. Potential migrants in Canada are ranked on a 1,200 point system, which enables young, highly skilled immigrants to be fast-tracked. The first part of their system is they see, well, can somebody that's from Canada fill that job? And if they can't, then it's opened up to people from abroad. Half of the points that you need to get into Canada can be given if you already have a job offer from an employer. The policy ignores race, religion and ethnicity and instead looks at age, education, job skills, language ability and other attributes that define potential contribution to the national workforce. Now this is important because it's very different to the USA's immigration policy. It might be worth going to have a look at that. But I've put at the bottom here and on the worksheet a PDF link to a really interesting article about how the USA might try to use some of Canada's immigration policy in the future. Okay, we're now moving on to the UK then. So the UK are introducing a new system. When we left the European Union, we changed our migration policy. Okay, before this, we had free movement within the EU. From the 1st of January 2021, we will have a points-based system similar to the Australian model. And the key focus is on highly skilled workers. From the 1st of January 2021, EU and non-EU citizens will be treated equally, giving priority to those with highest skills. The UK points-based system will come into force and is similar to the Australian system, where points are earned for lots of different things. The government have said they will not introduce a general low-skilled or temporary work route, but the settlement scheme that they have introduced for EU citizens will provide some flexibility for lower skilled work. As you can see, there are different points available for different characteristics, and some of them can be traded. For example, a university researcher in a STEM subject wishing to come to the UK on a salary of £22,000, which is below the general minimum salary threshold, may still be able to enter the UK if they have a relevant PhD in a STEM subject. Likewise, a nurse wishing to come to the UK on a salary of £22,000 would perhaps still be able to enter the UK. I've put the link here so that you can read more on this very current policy. The next example then is the European Union. The Schengen zone, or the Schengen area, is an area of 26 countries who have no border controls at their mutual borders. So their residents are free to live, work and travel freely throughout the Schengen area. Okay, we're now going to have a look then at immigration policies. I'm going to look at Pakistan's immigration policy. As I talk through the policy, I would like you to complete the table on the worksheet. Okay. So, in 2016, 7 million Pakistanis were working abroad, and 96% of these were in the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. You can see on the slide what those countries are. In 2014, 45% of its population was under 20. The government is extremely pro-emigration. One reason for this is that in 2013, migrant remittances amounted to $11.5 billion, the fifth largest in the world. And this is important for the socio-economic development of Pakistan. They have recently drafted a new immigration policy, which you can read about in your textbook, but the key points are that it aims to promote immigration and safeguard migrants and includes the following requirements. Okay, these are all found in your textbook, but I'm going to read through them. So the first one is ratification and giving consent to follow the key rights of workers and protection of basic human rights. The second one is to promote the export of Pakistani manpower abroad. Thirdly, to introduce positive steps to encourage female participation in overseas employment, which is currently 0.12%. Support for social networks and associations abroad, known as Pakistani diaspora. Establishment of training institutions to help people in preparation for working abroad, especially aimed at young people. And finally, the enhancement of the impact of economic remittances and taking advantage of the skills of returning migrants for development. So you can see there that the immigration policies are normally controlling migration, limiting migration, apart from perhaps the EU's example, whereas the immigration policy of Pakistan is trying to promote migration. Now, to finish our content on migration theory, we're just going to clarify what a bilateral flow of migration is. So this is the last part in your worksheet. So bilateral migration is simply the migrant flow of people between two countries. So any movement of people between two countries is bilateral migration. A really good example here is the Mexico to the USA. It's the biggest one in the world. And finally then, there are a number of factors influencing the flow of migrants, and we've looked at these throughout the whole of the migration topic. So the first one, costs of travel that might be related to proximity between countries. Obviously, the further apart the countries are, the more it's going to cost and the harder it will be to do. The second one then, ease of access and communication between two countries. If there are no borders, like in the Schengen zone, much easier to migrate. Efficiency and cost of sending remittances so that you can support people back home. Employment opportunities and wage differentials. So a good example there is your Myanmar to Thailand example. Established diaspora communities and networks. So a diaspora is a scattered population whose origin lies in a separate geographic locale. So this is a posh way of saying, are there other people from that community in that place? The effects of conflict and persecution might affect who is moving and where they're moving to. Where are they going to feel safer? Where are they going to feel protected? Migration policy. Is that country promoting people coming in? Do they make it easy? Is it a skills-based test or is it an open door policy? And finally, former colonial influences. Is the language the same? Is the culture similar? Now, all the extra reading that I've talked about during this presentation is found at the bottom of the worksheet. It's really worth going to have a look at those to really make sure that you have a really strong understanding of these migration policies. And finally, we have now finished the theory behind migration and we'll be moving on to our case studies next. However, there are a few of you that have not completed all of the previous work on migration, and I really urge you to go back and make sure you have completed it before you move on to the case studies next week, because otherwise bits of it won't make sense. And finally, I have posted a short review quiz. It's about 20 questions long on forms for you to have a go at, so I can see how confident are you with the knowledge of migration.